Picture a bustling city at sunrise. Streets fill with commuters, markets come alive, and factories begin their daily operations. Beneath this activity lies the beating heart of the economy: aggregate demand and aggregate supply. These two forces act like a tug of war, shaping the rhythm of economic activity and determining the prosperity of nations. Aggregate demand, or AD, is the total spending on goods and services within an economy. Imagine a grand marketplace where consumers, businesses, the government, and foreign buyers converge. Every purchase they make, from a morning coffee to a government-funded highway, adds to aggregate demand. But this demand is dynamic, shifting with changes in income, interest rates, or global conditions. Let me tell you about a small island economy reliant on tourism. During the peak travel season, aggregate demand surges. Hotels are fully booked, restaurants thrive, and souvenir shops bustle with customers. This boom reflects increased spending by both locals and foreign tourists. Now, imagine a sudden storm that halts flights and closes beaches. Almost overnight, demand plummets, leaving businesses struggling. This shift in aggregate demand is a vivid reminder of how external factors like weather, income changes, or global crises ripple through an economy. On the other side of the tug of war is aggregate supply, or AS, which represents the total output of goods and services that firms are willing and able to produce. If aggregate demand is the energy of buyers, aggregate supply is the capability of producers. It depends on factors like labor, capital, and technology. Now, consider the same island. A year after the storm, the local government invests in rebuilding infrastructure. Roads are repaired, ports are expanded, and renewable energy sources are introduced. This investment increases the island's productive capacity, shifting aggregate supply outward. Businesses can now produce more at lower costs, creating a new balance in the economy. But the interplay between demand and supply isn't always harmonious. When aggregate demand outpaces aggregate supply, prices rise, leading to inflation. For instance, think about a festival season where everyone wants to buy new clothes, electronics, and festive treats. If businesses can't keep up with this sudden surge in demand, prices soar. On the flip side, when aggregate supply exceeds demand, such as during a recession, businesses struggle with unsold goods and falling profits, leading to layoffs and closures. To understand how these forces interact, imagine a large concert hall. Aggregate demand is like the crowd pouring in, eager for the show. Aggregate supply is the venue's seating capacity and the performance quality. If the crowd exceeds the available seats, chaos ensues. Some are left standing, others leave dissatisfied, and prices for tickets on the secondary market skyrocket. But if only a handful of people attend, the show might struggle to cover costs, dimming the lights on future performances. Economies experience these variations constantly. During a boom, rising aggregate demand encourages firms to expand, hire more workers, and invest in innovation. This can lead to a virtuous cycle of growth and prosperity. Yet, unchecked demand can lead to overheating, where inflation erodes purchasing power and growth becomes unsustainable. Conversely, during a downturn, falling aggregate demand forces businesses to cut costs, reduce output, and lay off workers. This creates a vicious cycle where reduced incomes lead to further declines in demand. Deepening the recession. Governments and central banks step in during such times, using policies to stabilize the tug of war. Consider the financial crisis of 2008. As global markets crashed, aggregate demand plummeted. Households tightened their belts, businesses froze investments, and unemployment soared. Governments worldwide responded with stimulus packages, injecting money into the economy to boost demand. Central banks slashed interest rates, encouraging borrowing and spending. These measures helped reignite aggregate demand, eventually pulling economies out of recession. On the supply side, long-term policies aim to enhance productivity and efficiency. Investments in education, infrastructure, and technology boost aggregate supply, ensuring that economies can meet rising demand without triggering inflation. For instance, a country investing in green energy not only reduces costs, but also creates jobs, supporting both demand and supply. The story of aggregate demand and supply is ultimately about balance. Too much demand without enough supply strains resources and fuels inflation. Too little demand leaves productive capacity idle, stalling growth. Policymakers constantly monitor these forces, seeking to maintain equilibrium. But let's not forget the human element in this story. Behind every rise in demand are households seeking better lives, businesses chasing growth, and governments striving to provide services. Behind every shift in supply are workers, entrepreneurs, and innovators pushing boundaries. The tug of war between aggregate demand and supply isn't just an economic concept, it's the pulse of our collective ambition and resilience. As we step back and view the bigger picture, we see that variations in economic activity are inevitable, driven by changes in aggregate demand and supply. These variations shape the economic landscape, influencing jobs, prices, and growth. Understanding this interplay equips us to navigate the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead, ensuring that the economy continues to thrive, even in the face of change.